Hello and welcome back to another video. In this one I'm gonna break down my Enchantress build, which is a fantastic build that revolves entirely around dominating and controlling your enemies, while also dealing massive amounts of psychic damage. So you have a huge variety of things to approach combat with, and I've used this build on a solo or on a more playthrough myself, and I can confirm it's extremely fun to play and one of the best builds I've ever played, just because of how versatile it is. In this video I'm gonna break down everything you need to know to make the build yourself, from levels, items, gear, consumables, all there is to know, you'll learn in this video. Starting with my class of choice, which is going to be Warlock. The reason why is because Warlock doesn't just allow you to cast spells, but it also has that element of variety to it that allows you to also spec into melee without sacrificing any of your spellcasting power. So this build excels at this. This is why Warlock is so great for it. You could also go with Enchantment Wizard or College of Lore Bard, but both of those have the issue that they are just completely focused around spellcasting, leaving you extremely vulnerable, which especially on solo honor mode, but also on any other playthrough, is just annoying to deal with. So being versatile without losing any of your spellcasting prowess is why Warlock is just the best choice for this. And it also gives you access to a few unique features that just align perfectly with this build. So great class to choose overall. And we're also not going to multiclass, so it's 12 level Warlock from here on out. For our cantrips, we are not going to be choosing Eldritch Blast. This is entirely a thematic choice and doesn't have anything to do with the power of the build. If anything, the build would become stronger if we chose it, but I just didn't choose it. You can choose it if you want to, it's your build after all. Our subclass is going to be the Great Old One, because it gains access to Dissonant Whispers, which is an enchantment spell that deals pure psychic damage, which is of course going to be way stronger in Act 3, where you get the Resonance Stone, so just a fantastic spell overall. And we also choose Armor of Agathis just for extra damage when we do get hit, and just this only gets better the more we level up. As a subclass feature we also get Mortal Reminder, which is a fantastic feature, especially if you use spells like Hold Person and Hold Monster that guarantee crits, because then you also make your enemies frightened, and you have many bonuses against frightened enemies, so this is just a part of a chain of features that allows you to deal massive amounts of damage. But more on that on the gear section of this video. As for your stats, they're gonna look something like this. We do not need strength just because of how the Warlock binds the weapon. Dexterity 13, if you do start out fresh, I would recommend going 14 Dexterity, but later on, at level 8, we're going to take a feat that gives us +1 to Dexterity. That's why I have it -1 right now. But if you're starting out, I would go 14 for now, and then later on switch it out. As for your other stats, 16 Con, just for the HP, and also since you're going to be concentrating a lot, having a higher concentration saves is very nice. And obviously Charisma, our spellcasting stat, needs to be as high as possible. Alright, for our next levels, we are going to be choosing our invocations, our first ones, and if you are using Eldritch Blast, unlike me, you would have to choose these two, because they're mandatory for using Eldritch Blast. But I am going to be using Devil's Sight for the anti-darkness, and also way better dark vision, and Beguiling Influence for the dialogue checks. Pretty simple stuff. Next, Hold Person. Very infamous spell, just extremely overpowered, especially because Warlock upcasts every spell to whatever Warlock spell slot level you're on, so later on the spell is gonna affect way more enemies, and you can just crowd control an entire group of enemies, while also enhancing your melee side of the build, guaranteeing crits against them, so there's so much synergy between those two. And of course, we choose the Pact of the Blade. This is the only pact that matters really, because it allows you to bind your weapon to your main hand, as you may know, and then it scales with Charisma instead of Strength or Dexterity, allowing you to use your Charisma modifier for the damage and attack rolls, and since your Charisma modifier is going to be very high, your attacks are also going to land all the time. Additionally, this also makes it so you are proficient with whatever weapon you're using, so you don't need to worry about any weapon proficiency not being available. We are also going to be replacing this placeholder spell with Crown of Madness. And Crown of Madness is a very useful spell, especially in the early game with all the major big enemies surrounded by smaller weaker enemies. That's a very common theme in the early game. For example, the Inquisitor in the Githyanki crash, but also very early on draw Ragzlin with the goblins. Just make sure you affect the strongest enemy with this, and they just fight all the surrounding enemies. Very easy to use and very fun to use as well. Next, we get Bone Chill, just to prevent healing. Very good against Merkul, but also great in general. We still don't get Eldritch Blast, but again, if you want to use this, go for it, it's way better. And then Cloud of Daggers. This is a very fantastic spell. You've seen me use it in my videos as well. From the early game all the way up to the late game, just because of how Warlock upcasts spells, this will always be useful, and it's just a great crowd control tool. And yeah, always go for this one. And then for our feat, +2 Charisma, very mandatory, since our Charisma modifier affects our melee damage and our spell save DC as well as our spell attack rolls. This is very important that you have high Charisma, and once you kill Ethel at maybe like level 6 or 5, make sure you get +1 Charisma to get a flat 20 for +5 to all those stats. Next, we have level 3 spells at level 5, and you're gonna want to choose Fear here. The reason why Fear is so insanely good is because against the Githyanki and the Paladins, two factions of enemies that mainly use their weapons to deal all of their damage, once you make them drop their weapons and take them away, those enemies become entirely useful. And both of those factions are infamous for being extremely dangerous on honor mode, so just doing this basically makes it so they are a free kill. This spell is insanely good. I cannot understate how good this spell is. Overstate, I mean. Whoops. And next, we're gonna also pick up Slow. Slow is also great. Makes it so they can't take reactions. Can only take an action or a bonus action. So just ruin their entire action economy, basically. Then we're also gonna pick up Counterspell. This allows you to counterspell any spell, obviously, but in addition, something that you might not know is that it also allows you to counterspell many legendary actions. So things that usually deal like a huge amount of damage, for example, the high psychic damage Retaliation from Karnas can be counterspelled and saving your life. And obviously I don't need to mention all of the dangerous spells that other enemies can throw at you, so having this in your back pocket as a last minute save is always great to have. And the level 4 spells we get aren't that great, in all fairness. Dominate Beast is useful sometimes, but all of these aren't that game changing. Confusion is kind of nice, because it allows you to completely control one huge crowd, but I would almost argue that Hypnotic Pattern is better, because Confusion doesn't guarantee stun. It just makes it so they attack at random, which can still be you, so they can still attack you. While Hypnotic Pattern just stuns them completely. So I would always cast this one over this one, if I had to choose. Even though this is technically a weaker spell. Our next feat, as I said earlier, is going to be +1 dexterity for moderately armored, and we do need medium armor proficiency for a very specific gear piece I'm going to elaborate on in the gear section of this video. And yes, that one gear piece is so incredibly good for us that it's worth taking this entire feat for. So just so you know, make sure you have this proficiency. If you are playing any race that already has the proficiency, like Githyanki, you do not need this feat and can instead take something like Alert. Next, we get our Dominate Person, the main theme of this build, and probably the most fun spell to use as well. Just make anyone your ally and just have them go to town, especially on honor mode where all of the enemies are so incredibly strong. Having them as your ally, for example Saravog, you probably saw it in my latest video where I controlled him and he just obliterated everyone. It's a fantastic spell, extremely fun to use, and I cannot overstate how fun this build is to use. Additionally, we also get minions of chaos, and having elementals is very useful for a specific trick that I can show you in the gear section as well, so make sure to pick this up as well. Then you also get Hold Monster, and Hold Monster, depending on the situation, is just as good as Hold Person, just because Hold Monster works against so many very dangerous enemies. For example, Orin, Raphael, and also the Steel Watchers can all be Hold Monstered, so having this spell in your back pocket and to crit all those enemies out is fantastic. At level 11 we get our Mystic Arcanum, and this allows us to cast one level 6 spell per long rest. I would always choose Eyebite here just because it allows you to make people fall asleep or make them fear you for 10 turns straight. So basically you can just completely remove enemies from combat with this spell. And we also grab Telekinesis. This is a very nice utility spell because it allows you to remove any enemy way further away from you, and because your spell save DC is so high, they will always fail their save, so you can just keep flinging them away and making them never reach you. If you're fighting any group of melee fighters, this spell can be insanely good, and it's also extremely fun to use just because how far they can fly. Lastly, you can also pick Remove Curse to counter some abilities others have, for example Gorta's Hand or the Mystic Carrion's buff. All of these can be countered using this spell, so it's always nice to have. We also get Life Drinker, which gives us extra damage based on our Charisma modifier, which is going to be 6 at this point when we get level 12. So just free damage. And we also pick up Magic Initiate Bard, just so we get Vicious Mockery. This isn't mandatory if you don't want Vicious Mockery, you don't have to use this. I just thought it'd be funny to use it, so I picked it up. Again, other feats that would be available are Alert, and maybe if you change your playstyle a bit, you can also choose Savage Attacker, because we are going to be also melee attacking a bit. And this also allows you to get Long Strider for free 3 meter movement speed. Alright, next up are the items and gear pieces you are going to want to use, and I have sorted these depending on what act we find them in, just so it's easier for you to follow and update your build as you go through your own playthrough. Starting with all the usual items you get in your setup in Act 1. These are good on any build: the Armor Class Ring, the Bless Ring, the Adamantine Shield, Kargos Amulet, and the Boots of Speed. But the actual build specific items are going to be the Protective Sparks Wall for higher spell save DC, which is obviously the stat that makes it more likely that enemies fail their saving throws against your spells. Then also the Shade Spell Circlet for the same reason. The Bow of the Banshee just gives you more damage, but not more maximum damage, but it will make it more likely that your damage dies higher, because whenever you frighten an enemy you get a bonus to your damage rolls. And frightening is very easy because you could just hold person someone, then guaranteed crit them, and then proc Mortal Reminder, which is the ability from the Great Old One that just frightens everyone around. So this has great synergy with that. Your weapon of choice is going to be Fala Aloof for the unique ability. This also, if you choose the Shriek variant, will debuff their saving throws around you, so even more debuffs, making it more likely that your casts hit. And to bring it even further, you can also use the Gloves of Power to debuff your enemies as well, another -1d4 for their saving throws, so at this point there's really no shot they're gonna save, especially because all of the Act 1 enemies have bad saving throws to begin with, so it's really almost overkill at this point. But you can never be too cautious. And obviously, once you reach the mountain pass, you can also gain all of these Githyanki items. First off, the amulet for better healing, then this ring, which is actually pretty nice. just giving you 1d4 psychic damage whenever you're concentrating, and since you're always concentrating on something, this is basically just a huge deep damage buff. And then another item that is usually pretty overlooked, which is the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. Arcane Synergy, not to be confused with Arcane Acuity, is an effect that gives you extra damage to your weapon attacks based on your spellcasting ability modifier. So, right now it's +6 for us, but when you get the circlet, it should be +5. So you get +5 damage to all of your weapon attacks, and through a little bit of a bug that we discover later on, this actually applies twice. So you get +10 damage, which is huge, and it's just an awesome ability. And maybe you're thinking, okay, but this isn't just for free, you need to inflict a condition. But luckily, this ability drain passive feature applies every time you do anything basically against an enemy, and it counts as a condition eligible to proc this effect. So it's essentially always active. So don't worry about not proccing it. Next up, we have the Gloves of Dexterity, which are just an upgrade to these. The debuff is nice, but having more armor class, especially because we're not using medium armor yet, is very nice. And in the same spirit, you can also equip this one. It's less spell save DC, but instead you get advantage on keeping your concentration, which is, in my opinion, way more important. And that's about it for Act 1 already. You do get these boots as well, but right now you shouldn't be proficient with medium armor unless you are Githyanki. If you are Githyanki, you can already equip them, but if not, you need to wait till level 8 to equip them. Then for Act 2 items, we first have the Shadow Cloaked Ring. This is a staple on all of my solo honor mode builds, just because it's one of the few damage abilities that actually makes it so some of your other damage abilities apply twice. This is a way more common occurrence in Tactician, but on honor mode almost all of these are removed, but this one is still here. So essentially what this does is, on top of just applying the 1d4 damage, it makes it so this buff applies twice, this buff applies twice, so you get a huge damage buff from just using this ring. It's insane that it works that way. And again, on Tactician, many more abilities work like this, but on honor mode it's just this one and a few other ones. But that's why I always have it on my builds. But enough about that, let's continue through Act 2. We get the Brain Drain gloves from the colony, and these are actually pretty nice because they inflict mental fatigue whenever you deal psychic damage, which is always because of this ring. And mental fatigue just debuffs the enemy saves, and it can stack up to 7 times usually, but sometimes, I do not know why, the wiki says the maximum is 7, but I've seen it stack up to 15 times. That's essentially a -15 penalty to their wisdom, intelligence and charisma saving throws, making it impossible for them to save anything you throw against them. So these gloves are incredibly useful. I would always recommend having them, especially because so many Illithid powers, which I'm gonna go over in a second as well, so many of these allow you to apply more psychic damage, and all of these work with these gloves, so it's just a huge chain reaction and making it very hard for enemies to save against your spells. Next we have the evasive shoes. If you're still using the boots of speed, I think these are better than those, but if you're using the boots of striding, I wouldn't swap them out. We also get the ring of mental inhibition, which essentially also is another source of mental fatigue. But if you're already using the gloves, but you get these pretty late in Act 2, that's why I'm even mentioning this ring. If you are using the gloves, I wouldn't bother using it, but if you do not have these yet, I would equip this just for another source of this awesome effect. You also get access to this special ring, which allows you to command undead. I've used this specifically against Ketheric to make him drop his hammer, because he's a paladin, this is pretty OP against him, like I explained earlier with Fear. Making people drop their weapons is one of the most OP things you can do in this game. And also the Circlet of Mental Anguish, which is another one of these items that can be used similar to the ring. They have their uses, but they're just outclassed by whatever aids you can put on the same slot. But if you do want to go for like a lifesteal build, this is awesome to have, because if you have like a huge AoE spell like Confusion and you hit this on a huge crowd, each one of those failed saving throws will heal you from 1d4 hit points, so you get a massive heal from that. But again, it's just heavily outclassed by this one, and also the Helmet of Arcane Acuity, which is very well known for how strong it is. All you need to do is swap it on, conjure an elemental, or just use whatever you have available at the time. And if you actually bind your packed weapon, you have higher chance. And then you just hit them and get the Arcane Acuity. And you can also just swap this off once you have the Arcane Acuity stacked. You can stack this up to 10 turns and then just swap off to your Circlet, deal more damage and still gain the effect. And Arcane Acuity gives you +1 spell save DC per stack, so it's just a massive amount. And especially if you already have Mental Fatigue on the enemy applied, there's genuinely no way they're gonna save unless they roll a critical success. But that's a good time to talk about this stone. This stone gives everyone around you disadvantage against your spells, so then it's a 1 in 400 chance at this point that someone is gonna save against you, and it's gonna show up as 99% on your preview whenever you target someone with a spell. And a more well-known feature of this stone is that it makes everyone around you vulnerable to psychic damage, which is insanely overpowered. And luckily, since you have the level 10 Great Old One feature, which makes you resistant to psychic damage, you actually don't get this debuff. You don't get vulnerable to psychic damage, which is huge, so you don't get obliterated in Act 3. So you can just keep this stone on and be totally fine. Yeah, but everyone around you will be vulnerable, and of course, I think most of you already know that I've used this. The Shadow Blade deals pure psychic damage, and it's essentially the main weapon you're gonna be using. If you bind it, it works just like any other weapon, and it scales with the charisma, and it's just fantastic overall. You see, it deals a huge chunk of damage. All of the psychic damage gets doubled, and also then amplified by this and this. And you've seen how much damage I've dealt with this weapon. It's over 100 easily. It's just completely fantastic. But how do you get it? Pretty simple actually. You just get this ring from Arabella's quest and make a hireling cast the spell, then dismiss the hireling, and the Shadow Blade will appear in the inventory once you recall them, and you can just take it as a permanent weapon. This is a minor exploit, yeah, but I don't think it's too bad. There are much more impactful exploits than this, and it's just all for fun, so I don't see a problem with it. If you do not want to use this for some reason, you can still either use Fala Aloof, or also the Render of Mind and Body, which also deals extra psychic damage and is on theme with this entire thing. So yeah, I think that's about... oh no, I forgot something. This cloak is +1 armor class as per usual, the classic Act 2 cloak. And we also have the Dark Justicia half-plate. This is the armor I was talking about when I said that this armor is the reason why we take the feat. For one, it gives you higher armor class, which is always nice, but it also at the same time gives you the advantage on Constitution saving throws. So not only are you extremely tanky, you also get the advantage, and this may sound like not that big of a deal, but getting concentration broken, especially when you're playing solo, can immediately end the combat in a way you don't want it to end. So having this much protection just from your chest piece, while having just this chest piece, you don't need to worry about any additional protection. This is enough for whatever purposes you need. Of course you need a shield and whatever, but you know what I mean. You don't need to spec more into armor class or protection. As long as you have this equipped, you can spec everything else into damage and spell save DC and be totally fine. That's why it's so great. It single-handedly sorts out any defense you might need. But yeah, I think that's about it for Act 2. Of course you have these buff items that I use on any build really. This for the elemental weapon buff. This for the free advantage. And of course the Shadeclinger armor, which actually is pretty useful because it also gives you advantage on saving throws as long as you are obscured. But on a build that relies so heavily on the advantage, I wouldn't use this buff and just rely on it. I would have a guaranteed advantage that's much more useful. Usually this is enough, but if you really have so much value on your concentration, you shouldn't just use this, you should really have something more helpful. But yeah, let's continue into Act 3. And here we actually obtain quite a few useful items. For one, we finish our damage setup, which with 2 pieces of Dollar Armorous. Dollar Armorous adds 7 damage to your critical hits, and yes, this bonus also stacks with each other for one, and it also works with this double feature. So this ring is such a key feature to dealing more damage on any build really. I really can't overstate how important this ring is. And Dollar Armorous just adds more damage on crits, and you guarantee crits from hold person, which is almost impossible for the enemy to save, so no need to go for crit chance, you have guaranteed crits anyway. Next, we also get the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, which is an incredibly fun ring to use. It essentially allows you, let me just demonstrate, if you go into turn-based mode, and you attack this elemental, it allows you to cast any enchantment spell as a bonus action. I accidentally used my bonus action for my offhand attack right there, but if you still had one, you'll be able to cast these. As you can see, you see the quickening incantation feature right here, and it shows up as a bonus action. This means you can just cast Vicious Mockery as a bonus action, or Dissonant Whispers. All of these can be easily cast as a bonus action, and you can keep using your actions for melee damage. So this ring is essentially the key to having the best possible synergy between melee and enchanting your enemies. So if for pure gameplay fun, I would highly recommend using it. Next, we also have Viconia's Walking Fortress, which I just love this shield. It's insanely strong. So many good perks. I've gone over why this is so good many times. For this build specifically, I didn't use it too much, just because the offensive setup is so much more fun to use. But if you're really scared of a certain fight, just pop this one on and you're gonna be fine. Of course, we also get the better defensive cloak. It gives us less AC, but instead they have disadvantage on hitting us, which is huge. We also get this amulet that gives us a free +2 to our spell save DC, so we don't need to always rely on Arcane Acuity to get it high. Same goes for this cloak if you want really high spell save DC, and sometimes you do need that high spell save DC. If you don't have the opportunity to stack Mental Fatigue on someone, and if this target you want to dominate has legendary resistance, for example Gortash or Saravok, you really need very high spell save DC, because legendary resistance is gonna give them +10 to their saves, so you need to outperform even that, which is possible if you use all of these features, but make sure you do use it. Of course, more HP amulet, and since you're concentrating, higher constitution saves are gonna be great, but even though this gives you a huge bonus to those, I would almost say, since it's so late into the game anyway, this one is gonna give you more value in Act 3 I mean. So yes, this one is great, and if you get this one, you could even go off this one and swap in the Robe of the Weave, but it's so late into the game, and once you fight Raphael, you're basically done anyway, so this one is gonna do you more good, for the most part. Yeah, the Kite Staff is another one of these items that you only use for one ability. You can just replenish one Warlock spell slot. Not that great, especially because Warlock spell slots restore on short rest, so you usually can easily restore them, but it's just nice to have. And then of course the Helldusk boots. These are, even if you are using the Boots of Striding, these are just a straight upgrade, especially because they allow you to reroll any failed concentration saving throw, so really awesome overall. But I think that's about it. Oh no, you have the Nymph Cloak as well, which does give you a free cast of Dominate Person, but you do probably want to use scrolls anyway, so if you do have a lot of scrolls in your arsenal, this isn't that great. I would rather have this one on for more protection. But yeah, that's about it. I'm gonna finish off by explaining a bunch of the consumables, Illithid powers and scrolls, and yeah. Alright, next up we have our Illithid powers, and I'm just gonna briefly go over which ones you need, because you're most likely gonna get all of them anyway. But most importantly, you want Mind Blast, Black Hole, Psionic Backlash, Kai the Weak, Psionic Dominance, Charm, Free Cast, Stage Fright, and Ability Drain. And maybe even Lock of the Far Realms. All of the other ones aren't that useful to you, but these ones directly correlate with your build and really help you get going and enhance your build even further. Then as for consumables, you want either one of these two elixirs. If you got alert and not the medium armor proficiency, you don't need this elixir and instead just go Bloodloss all the time. Having the extra action is huge, since your actions are directly correlated with powerful spells. But you can always have just one concentration at a time, so you might have to spam this one instead, which is not a bad strategy. It deals a lot of damage. Just to tell you that you can't cast 2 concentration spells. But if you want even more actions, just for maybe a melee build as well, you can just chuck potions of speed and eat a bit of drugs, and just get 4 actions per turn, stab all of the enemies around you with your Shadow Blade, and deal like 600 damage per turn. That's why this build is so great. You can either go the route where you have your concentration and subtly manipulate your enemies, but you can also just stab them to death in one turn. So, just great variety. That's why I love this build so much, and that's why it's so fun to play in general. And of course, you have the Potion of Angelic Reprieve that just allows you to reset your spell slots. And lastly, this build benefits greatly from using scrolls, either those of spells that you already have, like these. Though if you want to use these in tandem with the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, make sure you have them in your inventory and not in any container, just because it only works with the bonus action if you have them in your inventory. But scrolls also allow you to get these 2 spells. One is Phantasmal Killer. I've shown in my videos why this spell is so broken. It just allows you to completely incapacitate one enemy and just essentially kill them if you don't break concentration. And this one just allows you to make any Celestial, Fey, or Fiend fight alongside you, and that includes Raphael, Auntie Ethel, and all of those very high damage story characters. So a lot of fun to use this one, though I should say Raphael only gets affected by it for 1 turn because of his anti-fun ability. But Auntie Ethel is a very fun time to fight against using this spell. But yeah, that's about it. I tried to keep it short, but somehow it still ended up pretty long. I did hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider liking and subscribing. I hope you learned something new, and I see you in the next one. Have a great day.